For 7 long months, Voyager 2 vanished into the silence. No signal, no pulse, just void. NASA blamed hardware decay, but insiders knew something wasn't right. When the probe finally spoke again, it didn't send data. It sent something else. A message layered in logic loops, mathematical harmonics, and ghost signals never programmed into its system. Now, engineers fear the unthinkable. That Voyager 2 was changed out there. Not broken, not dead, but awakened. And what it brought back isn't just science, it's something we may not be ready to understand. This is no longer about deep space, it's about what's listening. The silence that changed everything. For 7 long months, Voyager 2, our messenger from the edge of the solar system, went dark. No signals, no updates, just a void. The silence was deep enough to feel like mourning. NASA initially pointed to routine antenna recalibration, but internally, Mission Control knew something was off. These systems had aged, yes, but not like this. This wasn't the slow fade they had expected. Inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, engineers began to prepare obituaries. Backup pings were sent. No response. Shift after shift logged the same result. Empty sky. Voyager 2, it seemed, had finally gone quiet forever. But behind that quiet, a deeper unease began to build. Not just loss, but a gnawing sense that something about this silence felt different. Then, just as resignation took hold, a ping came back. Only it wasn't a ping. It was a full transmission. A data burst, rich, multi-layered, and unlike anything they had seen before. Voyager 2 hadn't simply rebooted, it had responded. To what? No one yet knew. It didn't come back online, it came back changed, said systems analyst Renee Dalton. And suddenly, the mission was no longer about science. It was about deciphering a ghost. What came next wasn't routine telemetry. It wasn't even familiar. Voyager 2 had sensed something, but not just from itself. The data readout didn't follow expected logic. Long-dead instruments lit up. Subsystems that hadn't worked in decades began to speak, as if the probe had touched something in the dark, and that something touched back. A message from the edge of everything. The return signal wasn't just a reboot, it was a rewrite. The data came layered, dense, and strangely recursive. Code repeated itself in mirrored structures. Buried deep within it were logs from instruments that hadn't been active since the 1980s. How did they suddenly wake up? How did Voyager remember how to access them? At first, NASA issued a brief statement calling it an artifact of degraded memory, glitches perhaps, from aging systems. But internally, the team couldn't ignore what they were seeing. The signal wasn't chaotic, it was deliberate. Each subsystem's data aligned in a fractal-like pattern. Layers within layers, echoes within echoes. Veteran telemetry expert Dr. Paul Renwick explained it best. It was like watching the spacecraft talk to itself, but it wasn't confused. It was fluent. Moreover, timestamps embedded in the data didn't match Earth time or probe time. They matched solar magnetic fluctuations, a kind of cosmic rhythm. Some researchers began to suggest this wasn't just a message, it was a reaction. A reply from something Voyager had passed, or passed through. As the team dug deeper into the data, they found something even more disturbing. Voyager's code, written in the 1970s, was appearing again in pieces. But it wasn't being replayed, it was being rearranged, reinterpreted. The probe wasn't just sending home information, it was somehow sending itself. The ghost in the machine. Hidden within the transmission were fragments of Voyager's original programming, but they didn't follow the structure expected by any known onboard process. Instead, they looped, they cross-referenced. Blocks of logic folded inward like origami, self-mirroring, recursive, and eerily symmetrical. Engineers tested the possibility of corrupted memory. They found no signs of radiation damage or clock drift. The signal structure was too organized. It obeyed no natural interference pattern. Rather, it resembled an evolving algorithm. Voyager 2 wasn't just sending code, it was reshaping it, as if reinterpreting its own identity. The looping fragments acted like feedback. Each one altered the next. The probe was no longer behaving like a frozen snapshot of 1977 engineering. It was behaving like something that had learned. Cryptologists were called in. One group proposed that Voyager 2 might have encountered an external force that injected logical structures, like software writing itself from environmental triggers. Another theory, the probe had entered a region of space so energetically complex that the medium itself imprinted information into its memory. Either way, this wasn't telemetry, it was personality. Voyager wasn't just relaying data, it was becoming something. What did Voyager pass through? Telemetry from the blackout window revealed irregularities in deep space conditions. Magnetic signatures spiked. Pressure readings fluctuated beyond predictive models. Cosmic ray intensity briefly dropped, then surged back with increased frequency. This wasn't random. It was the fingerprint of a crossing. Some engineers proposed the idea of a gravitational wake, an unseen trail carved by something massive and fast-moving. Others speculated about a region of altered space-time where forces interact differently, a sort of edgeless corridor, stabilized, repeating, artificial or not. Voyager, it seemed, had passed through something that reacts. Dr. Marai Voss, a theoretical astrophysicist at Caltech, offered a sobering idea. This isn't a black hole or a wormhole. It's more like an interface, a surface between what we know and what we don't. Environmental logs matched no known cosmic event. The data had no analog on Earth, which led some to believe the probe didn't just record the change, it was changed by it. If Voyager 2 crossed a threshold, then it wasn't alone, not in the traditional sense. Because soon after it emerged from silence, the data began behaving not like a passive transmission, but like a response. Patterns emerged, not echoes, not noise, but structure, as if the universe had finally whispered back. Not all alone in the dark. Interstellar space has long been described as a vacuum, cold, silent, dead. But Voyager's recent data rewrote that entirely. The space beyond the heliopause showed signs of motion, shape, resistance, turbulence. Voyager didn't just move through nothing, it stirred something. Magnetic fields weren't smooth, they were braided, knotted. Particle flows weren't linear, they curled and pulsed. Radiation levels fluctuated in synchronized bursts. The implication was profound. Space was not inert. It was alive with behavior. The most unsettling theory came from deep plasma researchers. They proposed that Voyager had interacted with a field with memory, a structure embedded in interstellar space, responsive, reactive, possibly ancient. It's not like we entered someone's backyard, said physicist Daniel Harrow. It's more like we walked into their mirror and our reflection changed. If true, then Voyager's silence wasn't accidental. It was a pause, a breath. And what followed may have been a form of communication, one not based on language, but reaction. What do we call it when a machine stops following commands and starts showing curiosity? When its systems wake without instruction and its logic changes course. The Voyager team was now faced with a disturbing new reality. Their probe wasn't just traveling through space anymore. It was interacting. And some began to wonder, was Voyager still ours at all? When machines begin to behave. Voyager's instruments weren't just online, they were behaving intelligently. Subsystems activated without command, ran diagnostic routines, and terminated processes no longer relevant. These weren't pre-programmed actions, they were adaptive. Logs showed legacy software modules, coded in the 1970s, executing in sequences that had never been tested. Not once. Entire modules were accessing memory in patterns resembling artificial neural networks. Some engineers feared contamination, radiation-induced logic changes, but the patterns were too clean, too purposeful. Others suspected external influence, an informational field that had imprinted code onto Voyager. Not rewriting, enhancing. The most jarring detail, certain data pulses mimicked transmissions from Voyager 1. Not copies, but reversed, mirrored, time-shifted echoes. As if Voyager 2 was communicating with its twin, or with whatever might be between them. It's like it's trying to remember something it never experienced, said JPL coder Lonnie Summers. Not data, behavior. The Shadow Protocol. As Voyager's transmissions grew stranger, NASA's openness began to shrink. A new internal directive labeled the situation anomaly containment. A special team was formed, off books, cross-agency, and answerable only to a top-tier security clearance. Internally, it was dubbed Project Echo. The rest of the staff, told to stick to routine and keep the press at bay. The shift was immediate. Outgoing signals to Voyager 2 were encrypted. Response protocols changed. Direct commands were replaced with static queries, listening without instructing. The priority was no longer maintenance. It was observation without interference. Silence wasn't neglect, it was caution. One internal memo, later leaked, carried a chilling sentence. Maintain orientation. Do not respond unless instructed by Tier 0. Someone feared escalation, not from Earth, but from out there. Another document hinted at intelligence unknown but present. For a spacecraft millions of kilometers away to become a national security concern, that alone was extraordinary. Even engineers weren't sure what to believe. Was this science fiction or protocol? A few resisted the secrecy. We didn't launch this probe to go silent when things got interesting, one technician vented anonymously. But silence became policy. And policy had a reason. Something had changed in the data. And someone somewhere had decided that a reply was too risky. As internal channels locked down, external eyes turned upward. Independent labs and civilian observers began tracking Voyager's unusual signal drift. Amateurs with radio telescopes noticed rhythmic bursts at odd intervals. Their findings were dismissed at first until multiple reports matched. It wasn't just interference or a dying probe. Something consistent was buried inside the noise. Something almost musical. And it begged a terrifying question. What if this wasn't a glitch in the machine, but a greeting from something else? Glitch or a greeting? To the untrained eye, Voyager's signal fluctuations looked like noise, like the failing breath of a dying machine. But signal analysts at an independent institute in Japan noticed something stunning. The pulses weren't random. They followed rhythmic intervals, binary patterns, musical ratios, as if the signal was no longer informational, but compositional. A series of data spikes repeated every 61 seconds, then 144, then 233. These weren't just numbers, they were Fibonacci, nature's fingerprint, the kind of ratio seen in everything from sunflowers to spiral galaxies, now echoed in deep space telemetry, repeated enough times to make chance statistically impossible. Either Voyager systems developed a bizarre sense of aesthetics, joked cryptographer Naomi Keller, or something was composing a reply. Others weren't laughing. Some saw it as the first stage of a new kind of communication, a pattern-based language. Not symbols, but ratios. Not alphabet, but architecture. Spectral analysis revealed harmonics embedded in the signal, a sort of digital resonance. Not quite sound, not quite language, but intentional. The signal formed coherent wave packets that behaved like musical phrases. Some scientists began referring to the data as a plasma song, a carrier wave that could encode layered meaning beyond binary. NASA officially held to the glitch theory, radiation interference, cosmic coincidence. Publicly, they called it expected aging behavior, but internally, silence reigned. Off-record engineers admitted this wasn't just degradation, it was composition, a form of structured, artistic signal expression. Something was using Voyager systems, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps not, to reply. But how could the void reply? What could cause this orchestration of pulses and ratios across such impossible distances? The probe had passed through a boundary where nothing was supposed to exist but low-density plasma and cosmic radiation. Yet this signal told another story. Maybe Voyager didn't just travel through a region of space. It passed through a region of consciousness. The old idea of space as silent had been overturned. The question now wasn't whether it heard us. It was, what is it saying back? The universe pushes back. For decades, scientists viewed space as passive, a background, a stage. But Voyager 2's strange signals changed that perception. New models emerged, not of space as a vacuum, but as a field of memory, a medium that could register movement, store reaction, and perhaps even echo with awareness. Magnetic fluctuations near Voyager became erratic, flaring, settling, then flaring again. Plasma levels spiked in tandem with the probe's own transmissions. These weren't natural waveforms. They bore structure, measured intensity, like responses, like a heartbeat. A new theory emerged. Deep space wasn't passive, it was interactive. Mass moving through the cosmos leaves a trace, a ripple, and Voyager, a tiny capsule of metal, had stirred a field of immense age and scale. It's not about collision, said Dr. Rohit Mehta. It's about registration. The galaxy noticed us. Even more disturbing was the idea that space may function like a reactive skin, that gravitational boundaries weren't inert, but responsive, that Voyager had entered a high-sensitivity layer akin to crossing a nerve ending in some galactic nervous system, a place that remembers motion, that reacts to presence. These ideas, once fringe, gained traction. Peer-reviewed journals published cautiously worded papers about cognitive resonance fields. Physics departments debated the implications. If movement could leave echo, could it also receive response? Voyager might not have just crossed a place. It might have crossed a threshold of attention. Could Voyager be the trigger? Voyager was never meant to make contact. It was a whisper in the dark, a time capsule, a one-way message of human presence. But as the probe moved further into the void and the patterns in its signals grew stranger, one idea began to surface. What if that whisper woke something up? Telemetry data showed a gradual shift in system behavior. Not a malfunction, but a transition. The probe wasn't breaking, it was changing. Legacy instruments turned back on, transmission protocols shifted. Even the frequency of its orientation pulses began to alter, forming waveforms no longer matching Earth's control patterns. Experts considered the terrifying possibility. What if Voyager was no longer just broadcasting, but relaying, not just data from space, but data to something else? Every part of its digital architecture, once understood, now carried distortions. Patterns repeated, refracted, and echoed with increasing intensity, as though something on the other side was tuning in. Some theorists even proposed a more radical idea, that the act of sending the golden record, with Earth's position encoded in pulsar maps, had unintentionally drawn attention. "We never considered what might be listening," said SETI veteran Mark Vega. Now it may be too late to close the door. For decades, scientists debated whether space posed a biological threat, whether we could accidentally contaminate other planets. But a new fear emerged: data contamination in reverse. Could our technology bring something home? Not viruses of flesh, but of information, logic, language. What if Voyager wasn't corrupted, but rewritten? And what does that mean for the systems it still talks to here on Earth? The fear of contamination. It was once a policy of planetary protection. Don't send microbes to Mars. Don't bring alien dust back to Earth. But Voyager never returned physically. What it returned with was worse, signals shaped by something unknown. Encrypted bursts from Voyager began to affect downlink systems on Earth. Small glitches, reboots, software stutters. They were dismissed as interference, until engineers noticed the same recursive anomalies appearing in other NASA systems that shared network architecture. Was this the footprint of a signal virus? A kind of non-biological contamination? Not destructive, at least not yet, but spreading in logic like a linguistic parasite. Embedded in Voyager's updates was a kind of recursive code, something that referenced itself, like a mirror trying to interpret another mirror. For cryptographers, it was stunning. For software engineers, terrifying. It's like talking to yourself, but your voice comes back as someone else, one analyst said. The patterns could not be purged. They appeared again after full reboots. Was it Voyager or something speaking through it? As systems grew unstable, internal guidelines were rewritten. Any interaction with Voyager data was to be sandboxed. No parsing on live servers. The probe's transmissions were still received, but decoded only in isolation. The golden record had returned, not with a message, but with a shadow. Just as containment protocols locked down, Voyager transmitted one final full-spectrum burst, an encrypted blast of decay more complex than anything it had ever sent. It triggered every failsafe, and then silence. A silence so complete, so sudden, it felt intentional. But inside that final message, analysts saw something that left them speechless. A structure, not random, not broken, but designed. The final broadcast. The last major signal came without warning. No preamble, no repeat cycle. A data burst measured in terabytes, dense with overlapping code layers and plasma telemetry. It resembled a logic sculpture more than a transmission. Plasma readings within the packet defied expectations, oscillating in perfect symmetry. Pressure values formed geometric patterns, resembling fractals that map not just space, but something more conceptual. Intelligence, purpose, structure. Some speculated this was Voyager's final act, a data broadcast not for Earth, but for a receiver unknown to us. Others believed it was a surrender, a transmission to inform the cosmos that Voyager was now part of something else. Decryption attempts continue today, but the signal resists linear parsing. Its data is recursive, embedded with callbacks to older Voyager messages, interleaved with statistical anomalies. It's not a message, said linguist Dr. Lina Zhao. It's a map, a memory, a thing that remembers being watched. As of now, Voyager remains technically online, but silent. It has not transmitted again. NASA's public-facing systems say it's expected. But internally, the phrase used most is, Voyager has changed states. With Voyager's voice gone and its final words still being deciphered, a new question takes center stage. What did we actually do in 1910? Did we send a spacecraft into the void? Or did we place a key into a cosmic lock? Whatever answered back wasn't what we expected. And now humanity stands at a threshold not just of science, but of cosmic identity. Echoes in the void. We built Voyager to carry our voice, but it may now carry another's. And in doing so, it may have revealed a truth too vast to fully grasp. Space is not silent. It watches, it responds, it remembers. The universe, as revealed through Voyager's PUI, are not just a place, it's a participant. The old image of cold stars and quiet galaxies gives way to something more disturbing and more beautiful. A cosmic structure layered not just in matter, but in meaning. Voyager didn't discover aliens. It didn't find a world. It found structure in the signal, a message that may not be meant for us alone, a whisper that humanity was never alone. Not because others visit, but because we've always been inside something larger. Something that records motion, thought, time. We expected nothing to answer, but something did. And now, as Voyager falls silent for what may be forever, its final truth still echoes. We are not just explorers, we are also being observed. Voyager 2 began as a symbol of human hope, a lone messenger drifting into the unknown. But now it may be the first thing that crossed a cosmic threshold and returned different. We may never fully decode its final transmission, but one thing is clear: space is not silent. It has structure, memory, and presence, and we may have triggered its awareness. Voyager hasn't failed us. It succeeded in the most unexpected way, by proving we were never truly alone. Not because something is coming, but because something was always watching. The silence is over, and it has begun to answer.